First thing to absorb. George W. Bush, as a former U.S. president, gets a library that's named after him. Second thing to absorb, former President Bush has decided that as an addition to his library, he would also like to have a think tank, which will also bear the name George W. Bush and will be devoted to George W. Bush-style thinking. The George W. Bush think tank has, in fact, announced its first initiative. It's going to make a TV show, specifically a public TV show, hosted by the Bush think tank executive director and distributed to public television stations nationwide. It will be a George W. Bush think tank TV show on public television. If hearing that makes you feel like a cat being petted in the wrong direction, it may be because you're remembering something about how George W. Bush handled the whole issue of public broadcasting when he was president. President Bush, you might recall, appointed a man named Kenneth Tomlinson to be the head of the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and the Broadcasting Board of Governors. Mr. Tomlinson distinguished himself in office by secretly paying conservative activists to monitor the political leanings of guests on public broadcasting programs. Mr. Tomlinson also gave the rapidly right-wing partisan op-ed page of the Wall Street Journal a public TV show. And in one of the most memorable and unexpected news leads about the Broadcasting Board of Governors ever, quote, State Department investigators found that Tomlinson used his office to run a horse racing operation. While George W. Bush, as head of the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and the Broadcasting Board of Governors, was on the taxpayer's dime, ferreting out left-wingers among guests on public shows, Tomlinson also, according to the Inspector General, spent time while at work overseeing his stable of thoroughbreds, which, I kid you not, included one horse that he named Hamid Karzai. That is who President Bush put in charge of public broadcasting. And now President Bush wants his legacy to include a George W. Bush think tank public TV program. If they need a co-host, I volunteer. Joining us now is Wayne Slater, senior political writer with the Dallas Morning News and co-author of the book Bush's Brain, How Karl Rove Made George W. Bush Presidential. Wayne, happy holidays. Thanks very much for joining us tonight.
Great to be with you, Rachel.
When I think about the Bush administration and public broadcasting, I think I mostly remember Ken Tomlinson because of the horse named Hamid Karzai thing. It's just a very memorable detail. Is there a bigger picture to remember, though, about George W. Bush and public broadcasting?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, look, the Republicans for years have tried to target public broadcasting, to cut programs, to cut spending, to abolish the agency altogether. The Bush administration tried for 8 years to defund public broadcasting. Its 2009 budget sent to Congress cut public broadcasting spending in half, and by 2011 it had zero. That would be $0 that it recommended or would have recommended for public broadcasting. So yeah, this is an outfit, the Bush administration, that targeted public broadcasting from the beginning. Tomlinson was the high point or low point, depending on where you looked at it. Tomlinson did exactly what Bush and particularly Karl Rove wanted to be done, and that was his part of politicizing government. While Rove and company were politicizing all kinds of things, Tomlinson was trying to politicize public broadcasting. I can remember one thing. There was a meeting where he met with some agents, with some affiliates, and he reminded them that they ought to make sure that their programming reflected the Republican mandate. He said later he was kidding. People at the meeting said, I don't think he was.
Wasn't there also sort of a mini scandal about something about a bunny visiting like a same-sex couple or something, and they tried to get that show banned? Am I remembering that correctly?
You're absolutely. Tomlinson wasn't the only thing. Out of the White House, Margaret Spellings, the education chief, complained loudly and effectively against a program where a cartoon bunny buster visited a pair of lesbian parents. Spellings said that was the awful kind of thing that public broadcasting shouldn't be showing in America, and several public broadcasting stations, though not all, pulled that segment. So I think there was a political agenda at work out of the White House that reflected itself in the way it felt public broadcasting should operate if it should operate at all.
Right, the important ideological point that they wanted to abolish it altogether. Well, the show's producer has cautioned us to not jump to conclusions about the content of the George W. Bush think tank public TV show. But the whole idea of the George W. Bush think tank is to promote his ideas and his legacy, right? I mean, isn't that by definition the purpose of the agency that's going to be producing this show?
Well, it is, and that's really the problem. Look, these could be good people. James Glassman, who is the executive director of the Bush Institute, will be a co-producer of this program. I'm sure he's a great guy. He has some journalistic credentials. But the problem is he's on the one hand operating a job where he's going to try to shape the Bush legacy restoration project through the library and the Institute, and on the other hand is supposedly going to be putting on a program where there's going to be an emphasis on exploring ideas in a way that would reflect favorably, I suspect, not unfavorably, on the Bush administration. I mean, what program are they going to do about the collapse of the economy? How will they describe that in an intelligent way, on public broadcasting without mentioning that it happened under the Bush administration? So it's a problem, I think.
Wayne Slater, senior political reporter with the Dallas Morning News. Thanks very much for coming on the show tonight and marking a landmark occasion, the first show in which I've ever asked the question in all seriousness, wasn't there something about a bunny?
Great to be with you.
Thank you, Wayne. Really appreciate it.